Ex-wife invited me to her wedding and humiliate me there. Everyone is blaming me, so I did this. I'm Martel, 32M, and I'm about to tell you how I somehow managed to ruin my ex-wife's wedding by, wait for it, actually showing up when invited. I know, the audacity, right? It's the year 2016, and I'm a fresh-faced 24-year-old intern, still trying to figure out which end of the coffee maker to pour the beans into. That's when I meet Marjorie. She's 23, gorgeous, and has this laugh that could make even the most soul-crushing Monday bearable. We're both interning at this soul-sucking corporate hellscape that promised us valuable experience. Marjorie and I start hanging out, swapping stories about our incompetent bosses, and daydreaming about the day we'd actually get paid for our work. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, we're dating. It was great, you know? We were young, broke, and thought we had it all figured out. Fast forward 2 years, and Marjorie starts dropping hints about marriage. And when I say hints, I mean she was about as subtle as a neon sign in Times Square. At first, it was just casual comments about how cute old couples were. Then she started accidentally leaving bridal magazines around our apartment. Now, here's where I made my first mistake. Instead of having an adult conversation about our future, I did what any panicked 26-year-old guy would do. I proposed. Why? Because nothing says, I'm ready for a lifelong commitment, like sheer terror and peer pressure. Am I right? Somehow I turned into a freshly minted husband at the ripe old age of 26, thinking I had just leveled up in the game of life. You know how they say the first year of marriage is the hardest? Well, whoever they are, they're full of it. Our first year was a breeze compared to the storm that was brewing, and then Marjorie began talking about kids. And by talking, I mean she brought it up every chance she got. Over breakfast, kids. During movie night, kids. While I'm brushing my teeth. You guessed it, kids. I like kids. They're great when they belong to someone else, and I can give them back after a few hours. But the idea of being responsible for a tiny human when I could barely keep my houseplants alive, that was terrifying. I tried explaining to Marjorie that we weren't ready. Financially, we were about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. I had just started my career and was bringing in enough for us to live comfortably. Emphasis on us. As in, 2 adults who don't need diapers or college funds. Marjorie, on the other hand, was, let's say, exploring her options. And by that, I mean she was job hopping more frequently than a frog on a hot sidewalk. She'd get a job, decide it wasn't her passion, and quit before the ink on her contract was dry. Her resume looked like a game of corporate musical chairs. But according to Marjorie, none of that mattered. We could just figure it out as we went along. Oh, and if we ran into financial troubles, no worries, we could just borrow money from our parents. Because nothing says responsible adults ready for parenthood like asking mom and dad for an allowance, right? Marjorie had it all planned out. She was ready to be a mother and didn't want to wait until her late 20s. According to her, we were at the peak of our youth and childbearing years. I didn't realize fertility worked like cell phone plans with peak and off-peak hours. I explained that I wasn't mentally prepared to be a father, that maybe we should wait until we were more stable, both financially and in our careers, that having a kid is a huge responsibility and not something to rush into. But trying to reason with Marjorie was like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. She was convinced that having a baby would magically solve all our problems, because sleep deprivation, constant worry, and financial strain are the secret ingredients to a happy marriage, apparently. This led to fights. So many fights. What started as disagreements about our future turned into full-blown arguments about everything. The way I loaded the dishwasher suddenly became a federal offense. My socks on the floor? Clearly a sign that I didn't respect her. It was like walking through a minefield, except the mines were Marjorie's ever-changing moods and expectations. After almost 2 years of this, I had reached my breaking point. I realized that we wanted fundamentally different things in life. Marjorie wanted kids yesterday, and I wanted to be able to eat something other than ramen noodles for dinner. It all came to a head one night during a particularly nasty fight. Marjorie, in all her fury, yelled that she wished she had never married me. And you know what? I wished the same thing. It was like a light bulb moment. Except instead of a light bulb, it was more like a neon sign flashing, "Get out" in big, bold letters. So, I did what any rational person would do. I filed for divorce. Was it an easy decision? About as easy as performing open-heart surgery with a spoon. But I knew it was necessary. We were making each other miserable, and staying together would only lead to more resentment. When Marjorie was served the divorce papers, all hell broke loose. She went from "I wish I never married you" to "How could you do this to me?" faster than you can say bipolar. She called me, sobbing for hours, begging me to take her back and cancel the proceedings. I'll admit, it was tough, but I knew if I gave in, I'd be right back where I started, miserable and stuck in a marriage that was deader than my dreams of being a rock star. The divorce itself? Marjorie and her lawyer came at me like I was the love child of Satan and Voldemort. They painted me as the villain in our story, conveniently forgetting all the times Marjorie had pushed me to my limits. You know how they say there are 3 sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth. Well, according to Marjorie and her lawyer, there was only one side. I was a heartless monster who cruelly abandoned his poor innocent wife. Never mind the fact that said innocent wife had spent the last 2 years trying to pressure me into fatherhood and financial ruin. Thankfully, I didn't lose much in the divorce settlement, except maybe a few years off my life from the stress. But what I did lose was any remaining fondness I had for Marjorie. Watching her try to destroy me during the proceedings turned whatever love was left into something that tasted a lot like hate. After the dust settled and the divorce was finalized, I did what any sane person would do. I blocked Marjorie on every platform known to man. I told our mutual friends that I never wanted to hear from or about Marjorie again. Some understood, some thought I was being dramatic, but at that point, I was fresh out of fucks to give about anyone's opinion on my life choices. And that, my friends, is how I spent my late 20s. While my college buddies were posting pictures of their exotic vacations and new promotions, I was navigating the wonderful world of divorce courts and alimony payments. Nothing says living your best life quite like legal fees and emotional trauma, am I right? For the next few years, life went on. I focused on my career, picked up a few hobbies, and generally tried to piece my life back together. I went on a few dates here and there, but nothing serious. After the Marjorie debacle, I was about as eager to jump into another relationship as I was to stick my hand in a blender. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. The Marjorie-shaped hole in my life had scabbed over, and I was cautiously optimistic about the future. I should have known it was too good to last, because just when I thought I was out, life decided to pull me back in the form of a wedding invitation from Marjorie. Talk about a plot twist, huh? Just when I thought I had successfully exorcised Marjorie from my life, the universe decided to pull a fast one on me. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon, and I was sorting through my mail when I saw it, a cream-colored envelope with fancy calligraphy that screamed wedding invitation. My first thought was, great, which one of my friends has lost their mind and decided to tie the knot. But as I flipped it over, I felt my stomach drop faster than a skydiver with a faulty parachute. The return address bore a name I thought I'd never see again, Marjorie Carter. For a solid minute, I just stood there, staring at the envelope like it was a ticking time bomb. I wanted to toss it straight into the trash, maybe set it on fire for good measure. But curiosity got the better of me. It always does, doesn't it? So, with the caution of someone disarming and explosive, I opened it. It was in all its gold-embossed glory, an invitation to Marjorie's wedding, to another man. Apparently, a wedding invitation wasn't enough of a shocker. Marjorie decided to follow it up with an email. It popped up in my inbox a few days later. Marjorie waxed poetic about how she'd love to have me at her wedding to reconcile because she regretted the way we ended things. She went on about how she had resented me for a long time after our divorce, but now that she had finally moved on, she wanted to make amends. According to her email, she knew the divorce had been particularly hard on me, what with her and her lawyer going for my jugular and all. But now she wanted to make things right by reconnecting with me at her wedding. Because nothing says I'm over you quite like inviting your ex to watch you marry someone else, right? I'll admit, my first instinct was to reply with a GIF of someone laughing hysterically, but I resisted the urge and instead did nothing. I figured if I ignored it long enough, it would go away, like a bad rash, or my student loans. But Marjorie wasn't about to let it go that easily. A few weeks later, another email landed in my inbox. This time she really turned up the emotional manipulation dial to 11. She talked about wanting to meet me and make everything right because she didn't want this on her conscience anymore. She even played the friendship card, reminding me that before we got married, we were good friends. Now, here's where things get a bit more complicated. While all this was going on with Marjorie, I had actually started seeing someone new. Let's call her Tiffany. Tiffany was everything Marjorie wasn't, laid back, career-driven, and most importantly, not trying to rush into marriage and kids. We had been dating for a few months, and things were going great. When I told Tiffany about Marjorie's invitation, she was understandably wary. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I assured her it was just closure, nothing more, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. I should have listened to her. Tiffany's intuition was spot on, as usual. So, I agreed to attend her wedding. I unblocked her on social media, and we started talking again. It was, surprisingly, not terrible. We kept things light, mostly chat about mutual friends and reminiscing about the good old days when our biggest worry was passing our college finals. As the wedding day approached, I found myself actually looking forward to it. Maybe this was our chance to bury the hatchet once and for all. Maybe we could even be friends again. The week before the wedding, Tiffany and I had a big fight about my decision to attend. She couldn't understand why I needed to go, and honestly, I was having trouble explaining it myself. "It's like you're holding on to something," she said. "I'm not sure there's room for me if you're still carrying all this baggage." Her words stung because deep down, I knew she might be right. The day of the wedding arrived, and I showed up at the venue. But as I walked in, I felt like I had stepped into a time machine. The decorations, the flowers, even the music, it was all eerily similar to our wedding. For a moment, I thought I had accidentally crashed a very elaborate reenactment of my own nuptials. I tried to shake off the feeling of déjà vu and took my seat. That's when I noticed the looks, you know the kind, surprise, confusion, and what the hell is he doing here? It was then that I realized most of the guests, including the groom, had no idea I was invited. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. I sat there, feeling increasingly out of place. I noticed a familiar face a few rows ahead. It was John, one of our mutual friends from college. He caught my eye and gave me a look that was part surprise, part, "we need to talk." I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a friendly catch-up. During a lull before the ceremony, John made his way over to me. "Martel, what are you doing here?" he hissed, keeping his voice low. "Does Jason know you're here?" Jason, I assumed, was the groom. I explained that Marjorie had invited me, but John didn't seem convinced. "Look," he said, his voice tight, "I don't know what game you and Marjorie are playing, but this isn't going to end well, for anyone." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me with an even worse feeling about this whole situation. As the ceremony started and Marjorie began her walk down the aisle, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but a sort of wistful nostalgia for what could have been if things had been different. But I quickly squashed that feeling. I was here as a supportive ex, nothing more. Then came the vows. The groom went first, and I have to hand it to the guy. His words were beautiful. He clearly loved Marjorie, and I felt genuinely happy for her. She deserved someone who loved her that much. But then, oh God, then it was Marjorie's turn. Have you ever witnessed a train wreck in slow motion? That's what Marjorie's vows were like. She started off normally enough, but then she took a sharp left turn into Crazy Town. Suddenly, she was talking about me, about our marriage, about how terrible it had been. I sat there, frozen in shock, as Marjorie proceeded to air our dirty laundry in front of everyone. She talked about how thrilled she was that her second marriage wasn't going to be as bad as her first, because she was with a much better man now. And just in case anyone had missed the subtle dig, she pointed at me and waved, like she was hosting some twisted game show. The entire room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, the sound of the groom's heart breaking. Because yes, while Marjorie was busy rehashing our failed marriage, her soon-to-be husband was standing there. What happened next was like a scene from a bad rom-com. The groom decided he'd had enough. He said, and I quote, "I've seen enough. It's clear you haven't moved on." And then he did what any self-respecting man would do in that situation. He walked out. Marjorie, seemingly snapping out of whatever trance she was in, started chasing after her fleeing groom. It was quite a sight, a woman in a massive wedding dress trying to run. As if things weren't dramatic enough, that's when I noticed Jason's mother stand up. She pointed at me and shouted, "This is all your fault. You ruined everything." And just like that, every eye in the place was on me. Again, I sat there, shell-shocked, trying to process what had just happened. Had Marjorie really just torpedoed her own wedding? Because of me? It was like being the star of a reality show I never auditioned for. Realizing that sticking around probably wasn't the best idea, I made a beeline for the exit. I almost made it to my car too, before I was cornered by my ex-in-laws. They demanded to know why I had shown up. When I explained that Marjorie had invited me, begged me even, to come, they weren't having it. According to them, I should have known better. I showed them the emails Marjorie had sent me, thinking it would clear things up. Instead of realizing that their daughter might be the one with issues, they doubled down. They accused me of always knowing that Marjorie had feelings for me, even during the divorce. According to them, by responding to her invitation and talking to her again, I had distracted her from her relationship. Right, because Marjorie is clearly an easily distracted golden retriever, not a grown woman capable of making her own decisions. My bad. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I spotted Jason storming towards us, his face a thundercloud of anger. "You," he spat, pointing at me. "Who the hell do you think you are, showing up here?" Before I could even open my mouth to explain, he was in my face, looking like he was about to throw a punch. That's when John, my old college buddy, stepped in. "Jason, man, calm down," he said, putting himself between us. "This isn't Martel's fault. Marjorie invited him." Jason turned his glare on John. "You knew about this?" he demanded. John nodded, looking uncomfortable. "I found out just before the ceremony. I tried to warn Martel that this was a bad idea. While they were arguing, I took the opportunity to make my escape. I got in my car and hightailed it out of there faster than you can say I don't. I drove home, and my phone was blowing up with messages and calls from mutual friends all wanting to know what had happened. The full story came out. Apparently, Marjorie hadn't even told her fiancé that she had invited me. The poor guy had been completely blindsided when he saw me sitting there. After he walked out, their families got into a huge argument. His parents were furious, believing that Marjorie was clearly not over me and had been forcing the wedding to make me jealous. But here's where it gets even messier. Remember Tiffany, the girl I had been dating? Well, someone at the wedding had posted about the drama on social media. Tiffany saw it before I had a chance to explain. Let's just say, she wasn't thrilled to find out about my ex-wife's meltdown from Facebook. When I finally got home that night, Tiffany was waiting for me, her bags packed. "I knew this was a bad idea," she said. "I told you something like this would happen, but you didn't listen. You never listen when it comes to her." Before I could even begin to explain, she was gone, leaving me alone with the aftermath of a disaster I never saw coming. Marjorie tried to defend herself. She claimed that she only made that speech because she saw me sitting there, and her plan was to humiliate me, and then move on to talking about how great she had it with her new man. Because nothing says "I'm over you" quite like dedicating half your wedding vows to your ex, right? But everyone was blaming me. Our mutual friends, Marjorie's family, even some of my own family members who had heard about the disaster. They all seemed to think that I should have known better than to show up, that I should have rejected her invitation and blocked her again. Apparently, I was supposed to have some sort of psychic ability to know that Marjorie wasn't over me. Never mind the fact that she was the one getting married. Never mind that she had sent me multiple emails insisting that she wanted to make peace. Nope, this was all my fault because I, existed, accepted an invitation, believed that maybe, just maybe, people can be mature adults and move on. I'm pretty sure I'm now going to be known as that guy who ruined Marjorie's wedding in our social circle. And to make matters worse, I've probably lost any chance with Tiffany, all because I tried to be the bigger person and accept an olive branch. Somehow, I've become the villain in a story where I did nothing but show up to a wedding I was invited to. I'm being blamed for ruining a marriage that wasn't even mine, and I've likely torpedoed my own chance at a happy relationship in the process. Tell me, am I the asshole here? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like I'm surrounded by crazy people who think attending a wedding is some sort of cardinal sin. But maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's some secret ex-spouse code that I didn't get the memo about. Either way, I think it's safe to say that the next time I get a wedding invitation, I'm moving to Antarctica. At least the penguins won't blame me for their relationship problems. Update. It's been a month since the wedding fiasco, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that happened. I've spent countless nights replaying the events in my mind, wondering if there was anything I could have done differently. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that this train wreck was inevitable, with or without my presence. Despite my best efforts to put the whole mess behind me, I found myself growing increasingly curious about Marjorie's situation. It's like picking at a scab. You know you shouldn't do it, but you can't help yourself. I tried to resist the urge to ask around, but eventually, my curiosity got the better of me. I reached out to John, my old college buddy who was at the wedding. He was hesitant at first, probably worried about getting dragged into more drama, but eventually agreed to meet me for a coffee. As we sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe, John filled me in on the aftermath of the wedding disaster. Apparently, Marjorie had been on a mission to salvage her relationship with Jason. She'd been bombarding him with calls, texts, and even showed up at his workplace a few times. It was a complete role reversal from our divorce, where she had been the one to cut all ties. John described it as watching a desperate game of emotional chess, with Marjorie trying every move in the book to win Jason back. But Jason wasn't having any of it. According to John, he'd moved out of their shared apartment the day after the wedding and was staying with a friend. He'd even changed his phone number to avoid Marjorie's constant attempts at communication. It seemed that Jason had more backbone than I'd given him credit for. As for our mutual friends, John didn't sugarcoat it. The blame game was still going strong, and unfortunately, I was still the primary target. Some friends had taken Marjorie's side, buying into her narrative that I had somehow orchestrated this whole situation. Others were more neutral, but still felt that I should have known better than to attend the wedding. It was frustrating to hear, but not entirely surprising. What did surprise me was when John mentioned that Jason had been asking about me. Apparently, he wanted to talk, to hear my side of the story. I was hesitant at first. Hadn't there been enough drama already? But John insisted that it might be good for both of us to clear the air. After mulling it over for a few days, I decided to bite the bullet and reach out to Jason. When I saw Jason approaching, I braced myself for anger, maybe even a confrontation. As he sat down on the bench next to me, I could see the toll the past month had taken on him. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before Jason finally spoke. He started by apologizing for his behavior at the wedding, admitting that he had been out of line in blaming me. I hadn't expected an apology, but it was a welcome change from the constant blame I'd been facing. Then Jason confessed that he had never known the real reason behind my divorce from Marjorie. According to him, Marjorie had painted a very different picture of our split. In her version, I was the villain, a commitment phobe who had strung her along for years before cruelly abandoning her when she wanted to start a family. It was like listening to a twisted fairy tale where I was cast as the big bad wolf. As much as it hurt to hear, it also explained a lot about why everyone had been so quick to blame me for the wedding disaster. Taking a deep breath, I decided to tell Jason the truth. I told him about the pressure to get married before I was ready, about Marjorie's obsession with having children when we were barely making ends meet, about the constant fights and emotional manipulation. I even showed him some old text messages I had saved, concrete evidence of the turmoil our relationship had been in. I could see the realization dawning on Jason's face. He had been fed a lie for so long that the truth was almost too much to process. When I finished, he sat there in silence for a long moment, just staring at the ground. Finally, Jason looked up at me and said something I never expected to hear. "Thank you." He explained that knowing the truth, as painful as it was, gave him the closure he needed. It confirmed his decision to end things with Marjorie and helped him understand that her behavior at the wedding wasn't just about me. We talked for hours, swapping stories and realizing just how much Marjorie had twisted the narrative to suit her needs. It was cathartic, in a way, to finally have someone understand my side of the story. By the time we parted ways, there was a sense of mutual respect between us. We weren't friends exactly, but we had a shared experience that bonded us in a strange way. However, my conversation with Jason didn't stay private for long. Within days, Marjorie found out that I had told him everything. She called me, leaving a voicemail that accused me of ruining her life, of turning Jason against her. But Marjorie didn't stop at angry phone calls. She started reaching out to mutual friends, to my co-workers, even to my family, spinning new lies about how I had sabotaged her wedding out of jealousy. It was exhausting and infuriating, but I refused to engage. I had learned my lesson about getting pulled into Marjorie's drama. The whole situation made me realize that as long as I stayed in this city, in this social circle, I would always be entangled in Marjorie's web of manipulation. I started looking into job opportunities in other states. The idea of a fresh start, away from all this drama, was incredibly appealing. I found myself excited about the possibility of building a new life somewhere else, where I wouldn't be known as Marjorie's ex, or the guy who ruined the wedding. I couldn't help but think about Tiffany. She had been right all along about attending the wedding being a bad idea. I had tried to reach out to her in the weeks following the incident, hoping to explain everything, but she had made it clear she didn't want to hear from me. I couldn't blame her, really. From her perspective, I had chosen my ex-wife's drama over our relationship. It hurt to think about Tiffany, about the potential we had. But I also knew that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to respect their wishes and let them go. So, as much as it pained me, I decided not to include Tiffany in my plans for a fresh start. She deserved better than to be dragged into my mess again. And to Marjorie, if you're somehow reading this, I wish you the best, but I'm done being your scapegoat. It's time for both of us to move on, for real this time. The next time you hear from me, it'll be from a new city, with a new job, and hopefully, a drama-free life.